Rock and rolls.
Yeah.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm Lainey Denslow of Worldwise Intercultural Training and Resources, and it is my privilege this morning to welcome you to the Global Chambers series, Conversations with Authors who are members of the Global Tribe. And we have 3 distinguished authors with us this morning. So let me tell you how we're going to organize this little time that we have together. I'm going to give you a quick introduction to our 3 authors. And then they have promised to answer some questions to help you understand what they wrote, how they came to write it, where the benefit is to all of you to read their books. So without further fuss, let me first introduce Junko Horvath, who is coming to us all the way from Atlanta. The rest of us are either in California or Arizona, West Coast people. Our global tribe extends across the country. Junko is the CEO of Fujiyama Wealth Management. She is a certified financial planner and a certified financial transitionist. Not a title I'd heard before, and maybe a surprise to you too. And she'll explain to us more about how that is the essential part of her work these days. She grew up in Japan in a very traditional household, which meant that the dad, the father, her father, managed the money. And she realized that her mother was not very aware of finances. And she decided at an early age that that wasn't the path she wanted to take, that she would be an independent woman, financially aware. And that's the life she's built and the work she does. She is a well-known financial planner, wealth manager, and in fact, she has been the recipient of Atlanta's 5-star Wealth Manager Award 8 times. It's 5 stars in the award, but she's won it 8 times, which is extraordinary considering that there are thousands of wealth managers in a city like Atlanta. She is the author of the book, Women in Financial Transitions. And when I had a chance to talk with her before this day, she said something that struck me as so important, and I think it resonated for our other authors, and that is when life changes, money changes. And when money changes, life changes. And I can imagine that all of us listening today would nod our heads and understand that from our own experiences. And we'll hear more about that from Junko as we go forward. She's joined by Dale Waters, who is also a CPA, a certified financial planner, but he's also a tax expert. Today, he's a senior tax manager and director of US Canada Tax Services for Beach Fleischman, one of the largest national CPA firms that we have. But he isn't just a tax guy. In his 40-year career, he's been a business owner, an advisor, a consultant, and obviously an author, not of just one book, but of a series. And he'll talk about that as we go forward. He's a multi-dimensional man, I want you to understand. And I was quite impressed to learn that he holds a 4th-degree black belt in judo and was taught by the founder of judo here in the United States. So a very accomplished man with different disciplines in his life. And our third panelist, also like Dale from Arizona, is Michael Tucker, who is an ICF certified executive coach. We know he's an author. He's also an entrepreneur and international speaker. And he said he's a tech product development enthusiast. I don't know if we'll have time to explore that, but I thought you might like to know that. Michael's the founder of Michael's the founder of Tucker. His name is Michael Tucker, coaching and consulting. He works with executives in their teams to develop their leadership and teaming abilities, their creative capabilities, and to elevate their listening and communication skills. In addition to the coaching he does, he's a founding member and director of strategic partnerships for an organization called Coaching for Everyone, whose mission is to increase the diversity of coaches throughout the country. And they are committed to providing complementary coaching opportunities for underestimated populations, especially for young adults. So you can see we have an interesting and diverse group of people with us today, all bonded together around the fact that they have written books. And I get to ask them all some questions about that. So let's begin with learning what brought them to write the book that they wrote. And I'd like Junko to begin. Tell us about what brought you to write your book, Women in Financial Transition.
Yes, thank you, Lenny, for the great introduction. So as Lenny briefly mentioned, my why goes back to Japan, how I grew up in Japan. I was raised in a traditional Japanese home where my father was a corporate executive and my mom was a homemaker. And my father was not a controlling person, but he never disclosed to my mother how much he made and how much we had in savings. Instead, my mother was given an allowance every month and she bought what was necessary to the household. And it seems like the money he was giving my mom wasn't so little, so she wasn't too worried about money, but she wasn't happy with the arrangement we had at home, which is we lived with my grandma, my father's mother. My mom and my grandma did not get along. So each time she was frustrated, she told me she wanted to leave home. And I told her as a child, where would you go? How can you live? You don't even know how much my father is making, how much he is saving, and how much you get. How can you go? Then one day my mom told me, Junko, my mom died when I was 2 and my father died when I was 11. I didn't have a chance to get education. So study hard and get an education. Education will open up doors and you won't have to depend on anyone else like her. So I took my mother's words to heart. I decided to come to the US and get an MBA. And eventually I became a financial planner. And I thought my mother's situation was because of her heritage. Then I quickly learned that even American women who are well educated, they didn't have a confidence in their own finances because they let their spouses handle all the finances because they didn't do that by themselves. They didn't know, they weren't aware of, so that they didn't have a confidence in their own financial situation. And it was very sad to know that. And then 2019, I decided to write this book, Women in Financial Transition, because I was really tired of listening to people come to me for advice after the fact they made big mistakes in a financial transition. So I thought that I can't just be sitting down and listening to those people one by one. I have to write a book and give my message to everybody that everybody should have should get in charge of their own finances and should know and participate in household finances. And that's why I wrote this book.
Great, thank you so much. All right, it's always interesting to know what's behind the book. And Dale, you've written not just one book, but a series of books, which is pretty extraordinary from my perspective. So would you tell us what got you started and how you came to write more than one book?
Of course, thank you. Good morning, everyone. And I agree with Junko. Even the women in my family, I kind of have to force that. Here's our stuff. Come look at it every once in a while so that you know what's going on. I know you're not interested, but I need you to know at least some basics. But it certainly is not just a Japanese cultural thing. It's at least, if not worldwide, it's certainly in the U.S. as well.
Mhm.
And for Junko's benefit, even though most of you don't know and don't care, but obviously I was not trained by the founder of judo, Dr. Jigaro Kano. He was dead before I was born. There's the founder of karate in the United States, Robert Trias. But anyway.
My mistake. I'm sorry.
But anyway, why I wrote the books? Mostly because, well, obviously I was in that business. So we had all sorts of clients and prospects and people calling us with those kind of questions. But really the thing that took me over the edge and actually caused me to write the book was the Great Recession. When U.S. market went down, the real estate went down, everything went down. And Canadians were buying real estate in the U.S. because they were the only ones with any money. They had home equity. So those that didn't have outright cash were borrowing against their homes in Canada and buying U.S. real estate. So at that time, really no one knew much about that. I even had other Canadian and U.S. professionals calling me to ask me what the issues were. So I saw there was a great need for that. And I wrote the first book, Buying Real Estate in the U.S., The Concise Guide for Canadians. And then that just led to another, the rest of the books, Taxation of Canadians Living in America and Taxation of Americans Living in Canada. Again, at the time, none of those topics were covered by books. I did a lot of research before writing books. In fact, there's like 2 or 3 other books I was thinking about writing, and I did my research and saw there's already a number of books out there that cover the topic pretty well. There's no need for me to dig into that, and I can't add anything other than what books have already been written, have covered. So, but in these topics, there were no books. So the second two books, the Taxation of Canadians in America and Americans in Canada, I asked 2 of my co-workers to be co-authors with me, for a couple of reasons. One is that, it's not all about me. I was the CEO, but I wanted to get the other people involved so they could have some bona fides on their resumes, and they could have all that kind of stuff, and people would call them and not just me, and all those sorts of things. But I found out quickly that sharing the load was actually more work than doing it myself. Like herding cats and getting people to do their part and all that other kind of stuff. But anyway, that's why I wrote the book, because there was such great need. There was nothing out there previous to that. And I also had to think about who would be the audience. Am I writing this for professionals, which would be a lot more in the weeds, quoting code sections and all those kind of things? Or I figured out primarily my audience was the end user, the people that were needed it. So the challenge was to write essentially technical topic in a way that ordinary people could read it and understand it. And anyway, so I went on and wrote that book, and my partner wrote 2 other books. So in total, there's 5 books in the cross-border series.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. And we'll ask you to dig into that content a little bit more in a couple of minutes. But Michael, you have a distinction too, is that you wrote with other people, which Dale just referenced, because you are a co-author in the book that you're talking about today, The Why for the Entrepreneur. So do you want to tell us how you came to participate in that and how that went?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone, and thanks for having us here today, Lainey. So our book is called the My Now for the Entrepreneur. And as I'm listening to Junko's story and Dale's story, you both had a great amount of thought that you put into this project. And our project was a little bit different. There was thought that was put into it. But what was interesting was at the time I was running a marketing company, and a friend of mine she simply decided that she wanted to spend more time working with young people, and she wanted to write a series of books. And so she invited a group of us, friends, to write a series of books. And so there were 3 books produced in total, and I participated in 2 of them. And so My Now for the Entrepreneur really is about this idea that becoming an entrepreneur really is a process of becoming. And in my chapter, what I talk about is the name of the chapter is called Let's Make a Deal Not to Chase the Deal. And so in that chapter, I talk a lot about what it is to be in a state of flow as opposed to chasing deals. And I share a little story about that. But yeah, the big reason was really just to create something that was easy to read for young people, and for us to just bond as friends as we just created this project. And so Sharon, the leader of our group, went on to produce, she published several other books, but this was the one that we all did together, and it was just a good time.
Thank you, Michael. Sounds like a little bit different experience than some of Dale's chasing those cats to get things done. Sounds like you had some fun, but it's interesting because to me, listening to all 3 of you, it's clear you all set out to provide a service, to be useful, to do something productive, to help other people with their lives, which is pretty impressive, and all did it in slightly different ways. So I'd like to go back and talk a little bit more in depth about what's actually in the books. And Dale, can we start with you, because you had an interesting comment that you chose to write, I'm not sure exactly the right words you said, but for the common user, not for another financial expert. And can you tell us a little bit about how that shows up in how you wrote the books?
Yes, certainly. So, anytime you write a book, you should start off thinking, well, who's going to be the user? Who's going to be the reader? Who's your audience? And there was quite a bit of thought and talk back and forth of those of us in the office. We decided, the end user. And as already alluded to in Junko's situation, people generally aren't that financially sophisticated. So you really have to take it down a lot of notches to make it understandable. So I wrote it in a almost conversational tone. Matter of fact, when you get reviews on Amazon or wherever they post those reviews, the most common theme was, thank you, it was easy to read, not like reading the, something from the IRS. Even their brochures or pamphlets or publications are all hard to read. And that was the biggest challenge, of course, is how do I get the message across in the simplest form, which is really the big challenge. So in the book, especially the first book, the real estate book, covers, starts off with, how do you even own the real estate, the Canadian owning real estate in the US. That's probably the most important thing of anything, is because depending on how you own it, depending on how the taxes flow, and depending on whether you're subject to US estate tax or not, and all those, it all starts with how you own the property. And then it goes on to, what's the taxation, if you just sell it down the line, what's the taxation if you rent it, and sales tax, and when or if it will be subject to US estate tax or death tax, and all those sorts of things. How do you report them on your Canadian return, not only your US return, but your Canadian return? And we try to give examples and all those sorts of things, try to make it as readable and common sense as possible. And the other 2 books are actually more broader taxation in general of Canadians living in America and Americans living in Canada. We just start from, okay, you're about to leave your country and go to, I'll just use one example, but works both ways. Say you're about to leave Canada and move to the US. You know, what do you get to do before you even do that? You know, like pre-immigration stuff. What are the tax implications of leaving Canada? What about immigration? What about, you know, doing your wills and trusts and things in the US? And what do you do with the ones you already have? And you work your way through, okay, now that you're in the US, what do you do the first year? What's the tax implications the first year? Then what are they the second through, you know, on? What do those years look like? And what happens at death? What about, you know, your parents die and leave you an inheritance or make you a gift, or all the various scenarios. And of course, we did that in 2 different books, you know, in both directions. So we try to cover everything, again, at a level that the end user could read and understand, and not, I don't think I quoted one code section, unless you count things like 401k, which is technically a code section, but, you know, but that's common language. So I think we did a good job of making it readable.
I wonder how many CPAs on both sides of the border bought your book so they could at least give them to their clients so they could understand what they were supposed to do and know what questions to ask, because it's a fairly sophisticated client who's just setting out to buy a house in Des Moines to think about all those issues.
Right. Well, there's no way to know that for certain, but anecdotally, I know many professionals that told me they bought the books and hand them out.
Yeah, nice to know. Nice to know. Thank you. And Junko, can we talk a little bit about your book? I remember one of the things you talked about was that you have quite a few interviews with people in your book. So
Yes.
could you talk a little bit about why you decided to do that?
Yes. So the in life there are many life-changing events, and sometimes it happens within like split of a second. For example, if you're a child, your father was working, your mom was home, your father died, and you are in a middle-class family. Suddenly you fell into poverty, or you are being sued, and your life, which was great, suddenly changed, or you got sick and you can't earn money anymore, you cannot work, or you have to move to other states or other country, or you won a lottery and you don't know what to do. Many things, you know, like that happens. So I picked the 5 major financial transitions in life. So my book has 5 chapters, and chapter 1 is divorce, chapter 2 inheritance, chapter 3 retirement, chapter 4 loss of a spouse, and chapter 5 selling your successful business. And then collectively, I interviewed over 50 people. And in each chapter, I have 3 or 4 or 5 people who went through those life transitioning events, like in chapter 1 divorce, then went through the divorce. And then after that, I just did not want to put the real stories. I wanted to give the message and advice, but I'm just one person, I don't know everything. So I interviewed all the professionals, such as divorce lawyers and a child psychologist, forensic accountant, estate planning lawyers, business brokers, Medicare specialists. Throughout all the chapters, I interviewed those people so that people can learn from those professionals. If you just go to those professionals, it's not cheap. It's like $400-500 an hour, but by reading my book, you can get those knowledge. And at the end of each chapter, it's as a chapter summary and all the advice that if you are going through that kind of financial transitions, you can really learn from my book. And then you don't have to make your own costly mistakes. You can learn from other people's mistakes.
Thank you, Junko. The two of you, so far, you and Dale, are protecting your readers, protecting the people who pick up your book, saving them from common mistakes. It's a pretty important goal to have, and worthwhile. It makes me smile to think about there you are, both of you writing your books, trying to make it as easy for people to understand as you can. And Michael, you have a little different experience as one of a team writing a book, but tell us a little bit more about what the part that you wrote and how it fits in the larger book that you were part of.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my now for the entrepreneur was really about the entrepreneurial experience. It's about becoming an entrepreneur. It's about planning. It's about stepping into your power as a leader and doing what's required in the moment to create the enterprise of your dreams. And it's the focus, as I mentioned on my chapter, was really about. It was really about the chapter starts off with me talking about having this great success on one of my highest grossing months in marketing, and what some of the emotional challenges were. It was interesting listening to Junko, because Junko, of the 5 different transitions you talked about, 3 of those were actually coming into money. And so one of the things that I talk about is how receiving this money created this experience of joy and abundance, but it also facilitated this kind of anxiety and this kind of self-doubt and all of these kinds of concerns. Oh my gosh, how am I going to do this again next month? And so what I talk about in this chapter is really about letting go of fear in the future in order to be present, and long enough to invite yourself to ask questions about the type of future you'd like to see emerge, so that you can begin to pull on that future, or better yet, have that future pull you into seeing the fullness of who you are. And so I talk about this idea of an abundance mindset from the perspective of seeing the abundance all around you, and then really just being present with that, so that you can move out of a place of fear and anxiety and into a space of presence, so you can have clear thought and make sound decisions.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I was just looking at what was to be the next question, and I'm going to open it up sort of to the 3 of you for a minute, because I think we've answered it in part. What do you see the benefit of reading your book for the reader? And I think we've heard some of that, of avoiding mistakes, Michael, of a little more peace of mind. But is there anything that you'd like to add to that in what you think about for the reader as a benefit beyond the most obvious, help them avoid some mistakes?
Well, I'll go.
Okay, Dale, go ahead.
Because one thing I didn't mention, but was really high on the list of the objectives of writing the book, is to illustrate how complex this is, and don't do it yourself. So while there are lots of answers in the book, but it certainly is not a how-to book to do it yourself. So it kind of exposes all the different areas, and they say, wow, this is really complex, a lot more complex than I thought. And they didn't even think about that at all, or whatever. And that, light bulb comes on and say, maybe I need some help doing this.
Okay, so it's to educate them to the complexities of what they're about to undertake.
Which will, of course, leads hopefully to them hiring me.
Yes, of course. They say a book is a great business card in that way. And because they could then, in a sense, I think this would be true for all 3 of you, walk away from the book with a feeling that they could trust you to be forthright with them and tell them clearly what they needed to know. And Junko, would that resonate for you as a benefit of reading your book?
Yes. So my book, and most of the finance books, not mine or Dale's or Michael's, are very technical. Most books are very technical, so that it's very hard to follow and understand. It's complex. And my book is all about stories which happened to other people. So you can see yourself and you can see like, oh my gosh, it's like me. Oh my gosh, it's like my mom. Exactly, that's what happened to my mom. Or like, oh, it's like my coworker. I really want my coworker to read this book. She was struggling about that. So that easily relate to people and understandable. So one of the person who wrote blurbs to my book, and this is my book. And in the page 1, here, there are blurbs, and I just quickly read one of the blurbs. And she said, as an only child, retired teacher, and a widow, I could easily have been an example in this book. The greatest asset of women in financial transition is that it's readable, accessible, and not written in a buzzword and vocabulary known only to those in the business world. A must read to all women. And she said she is going to buy 2 books to her 2 daughters. So it's hopefully through other people's mistakes and stories, you know, you would not only learn, but also enjoy learning.
Okay, that's great that you would enjoy the learning. I think that that's hearing the stories would certainly promote that. And Michael, I suspect that there are some stories in the book that you were part of.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of stories there, for sure. And you know, if there was a message that I was hoping to convey, is to really normalize this feeling of abundance, because believe it or not, a lot of entrepreneurs, they go into business because they don't feel abundant. They and they're trying to create it. So I wanted to normalize this feeling and the experience of abundance, and also normalize the reality of the emotional challenges that we sometimes face when that abundance materializes. And just letting people know that you don't have to be afraid of that. And there is inner work that you can do to help you be comfortable with the good that you created for yourself.
Which is a pretty powerful message too.
I think so.
I'm just looking in the chat. So I think that one question here is, and we'll sort of segue, where, now that everybody who's listening to this is excited about your books, where can we find them? Are they, Michael, you want to answer the question? We'll just do a little quick circle about where can you find them? And is it a hardback, paperback? Is it an audiobook? Is it available as an ebook? How many different ways can we access your book? Michael, you want to lead us off on that one?
Sure. So my book can be found on Amazon, and it is a paperback.
Okay. And Dale?
Sure. Well, mine can be found on Amazon US, Amazon Canada, on most like Barnes and Noble, most bookstores, and it's in paperback, and it's in like an e-reader or ebook.
Good. Okay.
And mine is also in Amazon and in a paperback and the ebook.
Okay. So Michael, we have to get them to turn yours into an ebook too, right?
That you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that would be the dream. But books that were written a while ago, it's a little more challenging, isn't it?
Well, we can always find out. So,
A new project for you out of this, graciously participating in this, and now we're making work for you.
Well, my experience is the ebooks have sold more than the paperback books.
Mhm. And I can tell you from my experience that Amazon right now is much more in love with ebooks than they are with hard copy books because they don't have to stock them. So, yeah, so that's a good next step. And glad to hear that Junko, you and Dale so far have the ebooks. And back to sort of related to why you wrote the book, but if somebody was going to buy your book and they only had 20 minutes, what's to read through it now? What one thing would you point them to first? So Junko, let's start with you. What, if I pick up your book, I've got 20 minutes, what should I look at first?
Well, with the 20 minutes, it's difficult, but the front part, there are psychologies about money. And money, when people go through the transitions, there are 4 stages of transitions. And a very world famous psychologist called William Bridges, he mentioned 3 changes of transitions, starting from ending, passage, and a new normal. And we, as a financial transitionist institute, added one before ending, which is anticipation. When life changes, like something is coming, something is not normal, anticipating, like, my husband may be sick, anticipating, and then ending, death happens. It actually happens. That does not necessarily mean that financial transactions happens, but then going to an passage, people stay for a long time. And while other people are saying like, well, it has been 3 years since you lost your husband, come on, already start dating, but you are not ready. You don't have your self-identity. You don't know who you are. You are Mrs. So-and-so for a long time. So you have to find yourself first before you reaches to new normal stage. So, and when people make decisions, our brains has 2 sides, technical side and a personal side. And which side do you think people make decisions? Even though technical side is a correct side, 70% or more people make decisions in a personal side. So throughout my book, there is a theme, and I'm offering the workbook called Choose Your Money Story Worksheet. And what is your money story? What's your money story? So your money story was created even before you are like in a kindergarten. And then it was formulated by the influence by parents, how they earned it, how they spent it, how they talked about it. And not only from the parents, but also from uncle, aunt, relatives, and the neighbors, and even from medias. People are influenced and form your money story. So I want you to get that Choose Your Money Story worksheet. And it's said in my book how to get it. And I want you to work on your money story. And everybody has a past money story and a current money story. And then even though the past and the current money story are not good, you can just look at yourself in the honest eyes and can improve it so that your future money story could be great. So it's offered in my book. So if somebody had the 20 minutes, I just want you to read the first part and get the psychology of the money and the mindset. Your mindset determines whether you are going to be successful or failed in the future money creation and wealth.
Thank you. And since you mentioned mindset, which Michael had just said something about, I'm going to take us back to Michael for a minute and ask you about that same question. If somebody picks up your book and has 20 minutes, should they just read the chapter, half your chapter? What should they read in that book in that 20 minutes, especially with the idea of mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. If they only had 20 minutes, keeping in mind this book was designed for folks who are becoming entrepreneurs. There's a chapter there that talks about business opportunities and selecting business opportunity. And what I would encourage them to do is probably take a peek at that chapter and begin to explore in their lives the path of flow for them. So a lot of times people choose paths in terms of business that they think is going to make them rich, but it's really, really hard work instead of choosing a path that is, naturally in alignment with who they are and what they're good at and what their talents are. And to Junko's point, sometimes, yeah, that does create a very, very difficult money story, because the story is making money is hard. And if you and that can become a self-fulfilling prophecy if you put yourself into an opportunity that isn't naturally easy for you. So definitely exploring that chapter, exploring how they can move into an entrepreneurial type of situation that's in a path of flow for them. And then as they achieve that success, maybe 20 minutes down the road, they can come back and explore how to really revel in the abundance that they've created for themselves.
Okay, that's good. And Dale, obviously I'm coming to you with the same question. 20 minutes, where do I go in which one of your books would I pick up if I didn't have much time? Maybe that's a sort of a different question.
Well, most people buy one of the books because they have a specific question or something, transaction or something they have in mind. But I would obviously encourage them to read that part of it, but mostly is to look at the other table of contents and see all the other things that maybe you're not aware of that you should be aware of. And at least getting a high level view of all the different parts, and maybe come back when you have more time and dig deeper into the other parts that you didn't even know it existed. As far as what book, I think it's pretty obvious depending on what you're doing in life, whether you're staying in Canada and just buying real estate, or whether you're moving north or moving south. I think that all the titles seem fairly straightforward. So I don't think that's the big challenge. But there's a lot more to what's going on than meets the eye.
It's fascinating to me to listen to the three of you and realize that if I just have 20 minutes in each of your books, I can really learn so much just by looking at your table of contents and getting an idea, Dale, of, oh my God, I never thought about these 12 things. That's a huge gift that you give your reader. So let me ask you a different question. Would you do it again? We're going to have a series in a few weeks with authors talking about why they wrote and how their process, but I'm wondering is there another book that maybe a different way to ask it is, knowing what you know today, is there another book percolating for you to write, or are we done with being an author in that way? And Dale, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, one of the things is that because of the technical nature, there needs to be additional additions with updates, tax law changes, and all those kind of things. But other than that, actually, I do have a book in mind. I always have a book in mind. Like I said, I do my research, and sometimes I've ruled them out. But one that even my family is encouraging me to do is write a book. I don't know, The World According to Dale. It's more like a moral, how to be moral, especially moral without religion, or in the presence of all these different kinds of religions or mores and cultures and all, just a basic way to approach life that you're good to yourself and good to others and good to the world.
Okay, you can sign me up as the first purchaser. So that sounds terrific. And Junko, would you write another book Are you writing another book?
I just finished writing this book, so I need a break. Yeah, so if I write, I was thinking that without relating to any one particular religion or beliefs, I want to teach people some basic ethics in life, like I learned in Japan. It's very simple. But for example, it's a kind of strange example, but my teacher taught us, like if you are the last person to use the toilet paper, in the bathroom, then you should not just leave with no toilet paper. And each bathroom had extra, and then grab it and put into the toilet paper thing, and then fold like in a triangle so that the person can pull that easily. So that kind of little things like that, I feel like if little things like that could improve people's relationship. And also if I have time, I want to learn how to use the abacus. In Japan, it's called soroban. My parents didn't send me to soroban school. I wanted, but my parents said, you don't need to. So I want to learn how to use abacus. Then I want to create some kind of charity and then teach that so that we, this country will be stronger, because in Japan, I couldn't use the calculator. The school didn't allow it. When I came to this country, everybody is using calculators for easy math. So if people start to use their own brains, like by using the abacus, so we may be, very competitive, against all other countries. So that's something I'm also interested in learning and writing and teaching, especially to the younger generations, like kids.
Yeah, and I think your interest in that, especially for younger generations, is a good link with Michael, with his emphasis on working with young people. And Michael, is there another book, another part of a book that you'd like to write? Is there colleagues you like to write with, or where are you writing?
Yeah, so right now I'm actually in a bit of a research phase right now. And so as a coach, I'm constantly looking for the latest and greatest in terms of leadership development technology. And one of the things that I'm discovering in my journey is that there is very little information about leadership from an Afrocentric perspective. And there's some great principles out there. So one in particular is a philosophy of Ubuntu. And it's this idea that, we know ourselves through others. And this idea that I am because we are. So really exploring philosophies like that and introducing it to the business world in a way that they can grab a hold of it and experience humanity in a different way and experience leadership in a different way.
Well, that would be a great contribution. So, here we are, and all the people who are on the phone, for all of you are the potential market. I mean, think about the reach of the Global Chamber in terms of research and opportunities. We're just in this vibrant, warm environment where we have lots of people we can reach out to. And I encourage you to think about that. And then, of course, there's one more question that came in from the chat, and that is, for that next book that you have in mind, that more personal book maybe, would you think about self-publishing, or will you go look for a traditional publisher or somewhere in between? Have you thought about that? Dale, have you thought about that when you think about that next book?
I have. It's a little bit tricky in my case because I had a publisher for the other books, and they have the rights to first refusal.
Right.
But the way around that is to provide them a lousy manuscript, which they turn down. And then that breaks that chain. Then I go off and they self-publish.
I would never think about it that way.
Well, actually, that's what the publisher told me, because I questioned that, and before we even signed anything, like, okay, so you have me for the rest of my life. I said, well, all you have to do is publish something you know we won't, or provide us something you know we won't publish. Then you're off the hook.
And then you would self-publish, not look.
Then I would self-publish.
Okay, Junko, what about you?
I would probably use publisher. That is because of my time limitation. That, as the book called Who Not How, by Dan Sullivan mentioned, we're gonna find who, and I don't have so much time. So, I mean, that doesn't mean I really like the publisher path, but because of the saving time, I would use publisher
Okay.
for my next book. Yeah.
Well, I would agree with your point in life, but I'm a little bit older, so I have more time.
That's great. Can't wait. Yeah, for that too.
Allocate your time differently, right?
Yeah.
And Michael, self-published, publisher?
I don't know yet. I don't know yet. But I'm open to both possibilities.
Okay. All right. I think, let me see. I'm going to look at the chat and see if there's anybody else that's got a question that I can find that we should. I don't see anything else. We have just a few minutes left. Is there anything we haven't talked about that any of the three of you would like to mention since we're together and we have this opportunity, about the experience of writing a book, about what you hope would get in the next book, or something completely different that you'd like to share with the global tribe, since we have attention of some of those people for a few more minutes? Yuko, anything you want to add today?
Yeah, so it took me a long time to decide to write the book, because this is not English, is not my first language, and that's kind of wimpy about that. So it took a long time, but I did it because I thought my speech ability is not too good, and I want to improve. And I knew that, or I planned, if I write a book, I'm going to get speaking engagement. So I kind of forced myself to write the book, and then I became a member of the Toastmaster, so that I get used to speaking. And then once I do that, I will speak like this and give my message. So I had a plan to force myself to do that. So that is great. If somebody, global tribes are thinking about writing a book, and I think it's a great idea to push yourself and push your comfort zone, and and I'm very happy about the result that I did it. So you can do too. If I could do it, you can do it too. Yeah.
That is great encouragement for everybody who's listening and is thinking about doing a book.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're happy you pushed yourself, because then we have your book in our world now. And Dale, what about you?
Definitely, that's at the core, yes, of why I recruited a couple co-authors, is that get them involved. They can learn more in depth, because when you write a book, you have to know, you have to learn. Like when you're teaching, writing a book is a form of teaching. And so you have to know more about the subject. So it improves their technical knowledge. It also improves their bona fides on their resume and gets them out there, gets them seen in the community. But those are all byproducts. I think essentially, I think the three of us, I think, are just, we do it because we want to help people. So you have to have a legitimate reason, a message to give that helps people. And then once you have that, then all these other things are gravy. and it helps you grow your business. I mean, you become an instant expert, even though you may not know any more you knew before. You write a book, you're an expert. And then again, you get speaking engagements, you get all these things. In writing a book, you're not going to get rich unless you're Stephen King or whoever. I don't know how many books, how many books there's about, say 11,000 books I've sold, which is a lot but you make between 50 cents and 75 cents a book. So it's not like you're going to get rich from, royalties, but you get rich from the experience, and you get rich from, improving your business, get more marketing and all those kind of things. Don't think you'll get rich from the royalties.
Good point. Good point. And later in the series, there is going to be a series about the business of being an author, and that is a really good point. That the reward, the richness of it comes in many different ways, not just dollars in your bank account.
It's in the doing of it.
And the doing of it, absolutely. And the people you engage with while you're doing it. At least for me, that was really part of the richness of the experience. So Michael, we're going to ask you, we're almost out of time. So I want to let you talk for a minute about that same thing, and then we'll wrap up.
Absolutely. I think books are wonderful. I love reading. And if there was anything that I would leave behind, I would just encourage folks to, if you do choose to pick up a book, great, read it. But spend time thinking about what you read from the standpoint of the cultivation of your own thoughts. And take those questions and those curiosities into a place of silence and meditation, so that you can access a higher level of thinking, even higher than the book that you're reading. I think that writers do a wonderful job of what they do, but at the end of the day, as individuals, we ultimately know what we need deep inside, and so that's the message that I would leave.
All right, I'm going to sneak in one more question before we wrap up. Doug Brunke, our CEO, asked a question, and I should ask it of you. Really quick, right off the top of your head, one book that you really like, and maybe 2 sentences about why. One book you would recommend that I read, or Doug reads, or all the people who are on the call. And let's start with Dale.
Well, obviously, there's millions, literally millions of books, and I must own half of them. But anyway, if I had, I guess the way to decide that is, what books have I recommended to my kids? And ones I recommended were, Make Friends and Influence People, the Dale Carnegie book, and Think and Grow Rich. Those are 2 classics. If you had to start someplace, that's where I would start.
Okay, great suggestions. Junko, a book that you would recommend everybody read?
It's exactly the same book as Dale recommend. Yeah, I was listening to someone called Bob Proctor, and he's 87, and he's amazing, and he's recommending this book. He has been reading Think and Grow Rich for past 60 years, and I read it once like 15 years ago. And so I just reordered yesterday by Amazon, and I'm gonna follow page by page, and every day I study about what Napoleon Hill or the Dale Carnegie, it's talking about. So I'm looking forward to receiving the book and read again.
Okay, and Michael, your book recommendation?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so since we're talking about Think and Grow Rich, for about 3 years, I actually led classes here in Tucson on that book, and we had hundreds of people show up for that book. People are really in love with that book. Definitely some good insight there. And there are 2 books that stand out to me right now. Number 1, Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. Great book. Yep. Great book. It really gives you some insight into South Africa and the African continent and his life, and there's a fair amount of humor there. And then Another one is called Silk Roads. That's another one. Silk Roads, it really talks about history from the perspective of the East. We learn about it from the West, but this introduces a whole different understanding and way of viewing the world, which I love.
All right, that's a great way to end because the global tribe is really about the whole world. And thanks to the Global Chamber, we have a tribe that we can engage with. And next week, we get to engage with 3 other authors and a really outstanding moderator. Our topic next week will be global innovation with Susan Linder, Alex Devereaux, Lon Safko, and Dwayne Canova, who I know from last week, who is a thoughtful, energetic, and kind man as the moderator. It'll be a great experience, and I encourage all of you to join next week, Wednesday, 9 o'clock in the morning, Global Innovation by the members of the Global Chamber. And Michael, Dale, and Junko, thank you so much. It's been a joy to work with the 3 of you. And I look forward to continuing our connection. So thank you all, and thank you to the Chamber for making it possible for us to do this today.
Thank
And
you,
with that-
Lenny.
Thank you, Lenny. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, Doug. And thank you, everyone. Michael and Dale. And yeah, wonderful.
All
Thanks,
right,
everyone.
all right.
Thank you.